This is Benoy Thanjan, host of the Solar Maverick podcast. I'm excited to share an incredible upcoming event that I'll be attending. WRISE, Women of Renewable Industries and Sustainable Energy, is celebrating its 20th anniversary gala on Thursday, June 20th in New York City. WRISE is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting the participation and advancement of women in the renewable energy sector through mentoring programs, networking events, and career resources. They're building a more inclusive and empowered clean energy workforce. The gala is a powerful celebration of 20 years of impact and a chance to connect with leaders and change makers shaping the future of sustainable energy. Space is limited, so get your tickets now at WRISE 20th Anniversary Gala.rsvpify.com. We'll also have this on the notes of the podcast as well. Let's get into it.
All this talk about what technologies come online and how we're going to do that, that demand growth isn't going to stop at 2030. It's going to go beyond that. In the curves that I see, it continues to escalate about the same pace for the next 10, 15 years. This is going to be a major opportunity and a risk for us going forward. So when we talk about that here and how we can meet that challenge and that opportunity, we do frame it in the all of the above approach.
Hello and welcome to the Solar Maverick podcast, where solar meets entrepreneurship and experience. I'm your host, Benoy Thanjan, so let's get into it. Welcome to the Solar Maverick podcast. I'm your host, Benoy Thanjan. I'm really excited to have Ray Long. He's the president and chief executive officer at ACORE, the American Council of Renewable Energy. We're actually at the ACORE Finance Forum, which is June 4th and 5th in New York City. And it's been amazing so far. We're halfway through the first day. Ray, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. And I know we've been trying to set up an interview for some time, and there'll be a lot of interesting topics that I'm sure we're going to be talking about.
Benoy, thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming. I've been excited to come on. I've listened to your podcast before, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today. We're at the Finance Forum, which is our big event each year. We do several events over the course of the year, but many people don't know this. The ACORE Finance Forum was the original ACORE event that started back in the 2001 timeframe when ACORE was launched. And it was designed to take financiers on Wall Street who were starting to invest in then the nascent wind and solar projects and connect those folks with the developers. And the whole idea of ACORE and the organization sprung from those discussions, as did this forum, which we're now doing 24 years later.
That's amazing. It's crazy to me because we've been a member of ACORE first through the Accelerate program and then ACORE itself, that I didn't realize about all the history behind ACORE and how it started. It's actually interesting. I interviewed recently on the Solar Maverick podcast, Tom Weinrich with EDP, and he was actually on the podcast talking about how he was basically looking for a job at that time and basically volunteering for ACORE and for the Finance Forum at the time, which was a different name. And then he actually educated me on all the history beforehand. And it's just amazing to hear about the organization and its growing and its impact. And obviously, Ray, you took over recently for Greg. Can you talk to our audience about ACORE? And I know you mentioned about the Finance Forum and your role in the company.
Sure. Thanks for asking. What you should probably know is a policy organization. So what we're really known for is a couple of different things. First one is we generate a lot of data-driven analysis on energy policy issues. So this is the analysis and the things that we put out for business, for policymakers, and for the media that really breaks down energy policy issues that are enabling the growth of the renewable energy industry in the ecosystem. And again, it started back in the day when Mike Eckhart launched this in 2001. And the whole idea was to not only start networking and linking the Wall Street folks up with developers, but it was also set up where Mike and his team, which included Tom Weirich at the time, to basically put out materials that they could use so they could better understand things like tax equity fund, and then fast forwarding today, transferability. And how does this transferability market work? And other things like that. So that's the first thing we're known for, this really solid analysis. And then the second thing is networking and creating a community of people that are interested in financing, developing, manufacturing, buying all clean energy. And now we've got this great and diverse mix of companies at all different levels, from the small all the way up to the large, that includes things like the hyperscalers, the folks that are building out the AI networks and the cloud computing, who are going to buy all this energy that we need to produce in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's exciting to see like the evolution and obviously things constantly changing in the renewable energy space. And then, as you mentioned, there's going to be an increase exponentially in energy demand, specifically related to AI, and obviously a lot of other reasons why energy consumption in the US is increasing. Can you talk about, maybe if our audience is not familiar, like why are we going to see large energy demand, and then how could renewables play a role? Obviously, all energy resources are going to be involved, but how would renewables specifically?
Great question. So let's first start by talking about how much demand is going to increase, because this to me is very interesting. When you look back over the last 2 decades or so, demand in the United States has been fairly flat. We know what it's been. We know what it's been historically, and we know that it's grown a percentage point, maybe 2 percentage points a year over that time. So very manageable amount. We knew that some older generations or electric generation sources were going to come offline and they need to be replaced. And there was all sorts of discussion around those things and what the supply mix would look like in different areas of the country. Boom, AI happens. Cloud computing happens. Electrification of industrial processes and manufacturing starts to happen. People start to install heat pumps in their homes more and more. All those things run off electricity. And of course, electric vehicle charging is part of it as well. It's an amazing thing where now you look ahead between now and 2030, and we're expecting, the demand forecasts are, we're going to need to bring online 160 gigawatts of new electric.
Oh my gosh.
Put that at home.
Yeah.
Very few people know what a gigawatt is. My kids laugh. I mean, my girls laugh when they hear me talk about gigawatts. They think about that.
Back to the Future.
Gigawatts.
Yeah, gigawatts. Yeah.
So 160 gigawatts translates into roughly 12 New York cities worth of new electric supply by 2030. That's under 5 years from now. It's not 2030 is going to come and boom, that needs to be there. It's incremental. It grows over time to get to that amount by 2030. So when I think about renewables and how that fits into this, we need to be building everything in order to meet that challenge. And let me just say one more thing about that. All this talk about what technologies need to come online and how we're going to do that. That demand growth isn't going to stop at 2030. It's going to go beyond that. In the curves that I see, it continues to escalate about the same pace for the next 10, 15 years. This is going to be a major opportunity and a risk for us going forward. So when we talk about that here and how we can meet that challenge and that opportunity, we do frame it in the all of the above approach. When you look at the supply mix of generation, we need everything. We need the fossil generation. We need the gas. We need wind, solar, and storage. And we also need things like advanced geothermal. We need to look at hydro and how that fits into the mix and whether hydro can be scaled into the future and all that. But the interesting thing is, you just look at that 2030 date. The only things that can really get built in that time frame are wind, solar, storage, and natural gas. And the natural gas piece is only about 50%. All has to do with what's being permitted now, where we can get the equipment in terms of supply chains, and then what can actually be brought online.
Sure.
All that other stuff that we're very supportive of and needs to be part of it. So when you talk about the nuclear, more natural gas, when you think about advanced geothermal and hydro and all those things, those are all out well into the 2030s before that's going to be able to scale. So as policymakers are considering things like the bills that are going on in Washington, and as developers are thinking about what needs to be developed and everything, the next 5 years are pivotal. And the critical technologies are wind, solar, storage, and circular natural gas. It's a very interesting time, but we need to be clear about, in this era where we talk about everything, what can actually get built and over what time.
Yeah, that's really interesting and it's really insightful. If our audience, obviously, a lot of people are familiar, can you talk about the tax bill that just got passed 2 or 3 weeks ago from the House of Representatives, the big, beautiful, I think it's a bill, right? Big, beautiful bill.
The big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, and how that impacts renewable energy.
So contextually, so 2.5 years ago, this bill, it was originally called Build Back Better and then passed as the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA passed. And that had a whole bunch of different tax credits in it that affect different technologies. And what it was designed to do was to incentivize large amounts of capital investment in a set of technologies. And one of the interesting things about the bill that was very intentional was it got away from this idea that you were going to have a different tax credit for specific technology. So a solar ITC or a production tax credit for wind. And in the end, it created the opportunity to shift those into what they call the tech neutral tax credits, which are actually two different. There's an investment tech neutral tax credit and a production tech neutral investment tax credit. Say those things back. And then it had other things. Manufacturing, something called the advanced manufacturing tax credit. It has different incentives to, one thing is called the domestic content bonus added, which is designed to get companies to buy components and products that are built in the United States for these projects. So if you were taking advantage of the tax credit and you used products that were built in the United States, you could actually get a little bit more in the tax credits that you were getting by doing that. And there were high hopes for this bill, right? We hoped that it incentivizes billions of dollars of investment. We hope that it puts a lot of people to work. We hope that we get a whole bunch of technologies that are built and proceeding in development. Manufacturing. We want to reshore manufacturing in the United States as well as supply chains to do that and other things that were in the bill. And the interesting thing is it really worked. All those things that I just rattled off have been taking place over the last couple of years. So let me fast forward to today. So there was a bill that passed in the House, and the bill that passed in the House is called the Big Beautiful Bill. And it's a reconciliation bill. It's being pushed by Republicans. It is not a bipartisan bill. It's a tool that's used. Other bills that have passed with those are things like revisions to the Affordable Care Act, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in the first Trump administration passed as a reconciliation bill. And of course, the original IRA passed as a reconciliation bill. So this partisan bill that passed in the House now would undo basically all of those tax credits. I just want to emphasize this because I think there's been some misinformation out there about it that, oh, this is a phase down of the credits and it's workable for the industry and all that. It really is. And it's a very complicated bill. And if you look at the way it's structured, it's really designed to basically immediately render most of the IRA unworkable from a finance and development standpoint. So it's a problem for us in the industry as a whole. So the process is the House bill goes to the Senate. It's pending in the Senate right now. Senate's working on this as you and I are having this conversation. In the next few weeks, some Senate version of that bill will come together. I can tell you that the hope of the industry is, let me step back for a minute. The industry is very clear that the IRA in the form that it was passed is going to change. And we understand that. And there are reasons for that. And that include doing things like putting together a fiscally responsible package, which the Republicans are trying to do. The flip side of that is we can't have a set of policies that were passed 2.5 years ago that have incentivized massive amounts of investment in development and created like hundreds of thousands of jobs in the United States that is then just uprooted to do this. So we know it's going to change. It really needs to be done in a thoughtful way that maintains a certain amount of the investment that's happening now in order to meet that demand we talked about. And at the same time, phases out those tax credits over a reasonable period. That's what the Senate is working on now.
Yeah, that's a great update. Obviously, for the renewable energy industry, it's obviously working with ACORE and lobbying, obviously, senators, specifically certain senators in those Republican states that are doing a lot in renewables and to convince them of why we should have a longer sort of phase out than this. I think you're referring to the ITC. Basically, there's 3 months after that you have to have a substantial.
So 2 months.
Oh, sorry, 2 months. Yeah.
Since you asked that, there are a few problems with the bill, but you just highlight on the main ones. It's the way the House bill passed is you would have to start construction on a project within 60 days after the bill passes. And then you would have to have it actually placed into service within 2 years after that date. And the reality of the situation is the way projects work is, number one, there are so many projects that are being permitted now and that are coming up through the pipeline will not be able to start construction within 60 days of the bill passing. And then the second part of that is for all the uncertainties that have to do with project finance and permitting interconnection delays, just as well as anybody does, to actually say that you got to place it in service by 2 years after is just unrealistic. It undercuts what we're trying to achieve with our energy supply, which includes, lowering energy costs and maintaining a reliable system. It undercuts both of those major goals.
Yeah, that's a great point. Why, you would think most of the new generation coming online is solar and it's the cheapest form. Why? And obviously you talked about energy demand in the beginning you referred it to again, and how much gigawatts or gigawatts, I forget what they say in Back to the Future. But why do you think that sort of tax bill was passed when, I guess what a lot of people don't understand in the industry is like, why would you hurt the cheapest and most plentiful asset that could easily come online? That's what I think a lot of the industry doesn't like understand, because it doesn't sound like long-term sort of thinking.
We frame it a little differently. And sure, I just say this. We talk about the demand challenge and we talk about, hey, we need to build all stuff, right? And all the reasons for creating the jobs, making the investment, driving the economy, holding prices down, all those things. And then being able to maintain and build upon the United States' dominance, if you in AI evolution, cloud computing, and those things, which is highly important to our competitiveness in the world right now. So we've got issues in dealing with that. Let's pivot over to China, our biggest competitor on that. China has the exact same issues that we do with demand growth. Same timeframes, maybe a different scale. 2024, China outspent the United States 3-1 on what they spent on energy infrastructure in their country. And they did it in two areas. One is transmission, and the other one is generation. They built a ton of transmission. They're upgrading their grid. The second thing is on the generation side, they built everything. They built solar, wind, storage, the renewables. They built nuclear. They're building hydrogen. They're building coal and, of course, natural gas, and they're making this sun, right? But the bottom line is a true all of the above approach. They're doing it all. China is building wind, solar, and storage. We know the benefits of that. Low cost power, it is reliable, all that. But you know why they're not building it? They're not building it because they're woke. They're building it because they're clear-eyed. That's part of the all of the above solution. It's going to get them to beat the United States. They're the main competitor in this race for AI and cloud computing and all that. They are clear-eyed. They've got a strategy. It's all of the above, and they're executing on it. And we're over here in the United States with this incredible amount of investment that's been made. And then we've got a bill that's pending that would essentially upend that development right now. It put our competitiveness at risk against China.
For sure. No, that's a great way of explaining a lot of complicated topics in a very clear and concise manner. Just going back to the Finance Forum, we're here at the Finance Forum. Obviously, this is one of the topics that's going to be discussed, I think, in a future session. But can you talk about the different topics that are being discussed at the forum, and what are some of the ones that people seem to be most interested in?
Sure. A couple of things. So number one, we've got a number of panelists that are on energy finance and relating to policy, but energy finance, and they break down several different topics, per the panel. Second thing is there's been a lot of interest in AI evolutionary growth and what that means for new projects and technology. So this morning we had a bunch of folks come in and just talk about energy financing and technology in relation to AI, what we just talked about. In a little while this afternoon, we've got a panel that's going to break down the policy issues, some of which we just talked about, or we're going to get into those in more details, as well as what might be the fixes for those. And then we've got a number of working groups that will break out into different specific areas to talk about other challenges. And Benoy, I just wanted to throw out yours since you asked about it. One of the awesome things about ACORE, and something I know that you've been intimately involved in, is our ACORE Accelerate program, and which is essentially a networking and mentorship program for small and mid-sized companies like yours. And we have our current cohort, ACORE Accelerate members who are participating here in the Finance Forum, but they're also holding a separate training session for them as well. We've literally got every size company here, from single entrepreneurs and mom and pop organizations all the way up to the hyperscalers like the Googles and the Metas and those folks as well. It's really a fascinating group that we've got here contributing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I can't believe how much buzz with two different sort of conferences happening. And then obviously I appreciate Ray giving me the opportunity to have the Solar Maverick podcast here at the ACORE Finance Forum. And then I was an original for the first class of the ACORE Accelerate program, and now we're an ACORE member. And it's amazing to see just the wide breadth and different, already in this brief time, just for half the day, how many different people I've met in different parts of the industry. And as you mentioned, different sizes as well. And it's a really great way of just meeting a lot of new people who are doing amazing things in the industry. I appreciate I know the ACORE team has been working nonstop to get this obviously to where it's an amazing event. So I appreciate everything that ACORE has done to organize this. And it's been amazing so far. I can't wait for the next day and a half of activities. So I appreciate that. And I'm sure that people are talking about some of the other bottlenecks when it comes to like renewable energy permitting and siting, interconnection. I think there's actually someone from the former FERC head coming to speak at this. Can you talk about like what are some of the discussions that ACORE is having to help sort of alleviate these bottlenecks that are taking projects to be developed a lot longer than maybe, and then obviously you have queues in certain places and it's just taking forever for the projects to go through the interconnection queue or getting approved, or there's huge sort of it's a lot of projects to take going through that sort of queue process, which makes
Yeah. So thanks for the shout out on panel today. And I forgot about that one. Yes. Former FERC chairman Rich Glick is coming in to today or tomorrow to run a panel. He's going to talk about permitting and for Order 1920, which is the planning rule and a whole bunch of other things that he was involved in. Just a fantastic guy and great panel. It's part of that. On permitting reform, big priority, right? When you look across the United States, the fact that we've got projects and transmission lines all over together that can take anywhere from 5 to 17 years in one instance to get permitted. You just look at that and you say, how can any one institution that's looking to build a project or a transmission line sit there and hang around for a decade or more to get the project permitted before they can move forward? And it's tough and it needs to change. We should be able to get to the place where state and federal permitting gets to a point where it's 5 years and the company and the communities that are going in get to a go or no go decision on the permit so that they can make a decision and move forward or not. And we just don't have that now. The way the process is structured at the state and federal level, there are just too many opportunities to drag out the permitting process for years on end without deadlines. Now, a bunch of states have done things in the past to fix it. New York in particular, I'm familiar with a long time ago. I don't want to date myself here, but passed a lot and sought to get energy projects fully permitted. We get all the major permits at the state level living here. And that was really ambitious, but the goal was right. It's how do we condense these things down so that there's as little redundancy as possible so that the communities that they're going through have ample time to both weigh in on the project and go through a reasonable set of appeals, where at the end they have, again, a trial very community against student aid circuit. It's that same approach that Senators Barrasso and Manchin last year tried to put in place when they had, I think it was called the EPRA bill, which didn't wind up passing. But it was a very well-intentioned bill that had both a fossil component and a clean energy to it. That would have gone a long way to address some issues without opening up the can of worms that is NEPA in a big way. It had some what they call judicial reform pieces. Same didn't open up NEPA completely. So that didn't pass. So what we're hearing now is still a lot of interest on the Republican and the Democratic side to address these permitting challenges. We don't think that they're going to get dealt with as part of this bill that we just talked about, the reconciliation bill. But what we're hearing is that there is appetite on both sides in Congress to maybe address that later in the year after this bill gets dealt. Our hope is that happens and we'll attack that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just you briefly mentioned this. Obviously, the next step is right now the Senate's going through the House tax bill. Is there like a time frame that the tax bill will be finalized? You know, President Trump wants July 4th, but I'm hearing a lot of people are saying that's unrealistic sort of time frame. What do you think is like the realistic time frame for any sort of finalization of the tax bill?
Okay, so historically, a bill like this would not be able to be passed as quickly as July 4th, but I'm going to come back to that in a second. There are two real deadlines, hard deadlines, the Senate and the House have to act by this year. One is the debt ceiling extension, and they call that the X date on it. The X date here that has to be addressed by is about mid-August. That's an eliminate to act by. So there's line of sight at them acting by mid-August because of the need to address the debt ceiling. And the other one's at the end of the year as part of the end of the year budget process. Those are the two hard deadlines. If you were a betting man and you looked at things historically, you would be betting on either of those dates and not on July 4th. But here's the interesting thing about what's happened this year. In the House leading up to the passage of Big Beautiful Bill, the Speaker was able to meet every deadline that the pundits that were looking at things historically said was not doable. He hit every one, including one to get the bill passed by Memorial.
Yeah.
If you're looking at that and that the speaker did do that, and you're looking at the president leading in saying, get this on my desk by July 4th,
Yeah.
you're going to take that quite seriously.
Oh, for sure.
And all of us are. In fact, Senate's in this week. They're working on this. And we know that this is the bill that they're all focused on. There is line of sight to actually get it done, even though it breaks with historic norms. It's a very complex bill. In normal year, it would take longer.
Yeah, that's really interesting because obviously, like the Senate has said that there are going to be changes, or some people want some major changes. The House Speaker has said not to make a lot of changes because it barely got approved 2 weeks ago. And then obviously President Trump would like to have it done by July. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see the dynamic. It's interesting because I remember with the renewable, the ITC, and by the way, we're experiencing this from the development side. We're just rushing to get to NTP, then substantial completion, not sufficient, but enough to basically qualify for the investment tax credit. So it's like, it was similar to those times every year where you didn't know whether the ITC would be there the next year. So it's like everyone's now in a rush. And then we would find out at the end of December whether it got extended or not. So this kind of reminds me of that. I know we all were hoping for some sort of certainty more than 1 to 2 years with obviously the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's interesting.
As you would talk about the previous term, working on that every year for my eyes started twitching. It so feels like that.
Oh, it does definitely feel like that again. That's really interesting. Some of the things you talked about. Obviously, it's great that there's a member of FERC who was part of FERC coming to speak today. You talked about permitting and siting. What about interconnection? I mean, I think I like that the ITC took into account like interconnection as part of the cost that you could qualify for it. But obviously that could be in flux. And then like the interconnection queues just in a lot of the major ISOs are filled with projects. What's sort of, I guess, the long-term sort of prognosis to kind of fix these sorts of challenging situations?
That's very complex. Here's a situation where you've got FERC involved, they'll get the ISOs involved, the states all had a say in how that plays. That's straight. And they're all dealing with different things. I mean, you take Virginia, for example, where you've got a data center at LA. This is one, we went out to Loudoun County back in February, I think it was. We brought a bunch of staff from the Hill out to see a data center construction. And the county economic development person for Loudoun County, this is the person that's charged with kind of figuring out the process, how they get to local county permits for data centers.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, so, we've got this whole down to a science now. We got this application you need to fill out.
Sure.
We already programmed it. And then he says, and we've got 112 applications from 112 data centers, more that are in Arcata considered now. Just that county in PJM. And this county has 112 more data centers in all that load associated coming online. And every one of those needs to be interconnected. And the local co-op and the utility will tell you that there's like a 7-year wait to get through to do that.
Oh my gosh.
So how do you plan for that? So I just wanted to, I'm not picking on anybody. I just wanted to bring it back that this is a really interesting time that we live in where we've actually got to solve for that challenge for getting those data centers and other load connected to the grid and finding a way to do it in a more expedited basis on that. The flip side is, while this is going on, you've got major load centers like data centers that are looking to do things like build behind the meter generation.
Yeah.
Because they can't wait for 7
Always for staying. Yeah.
This is a very present issue. It's very complicated and there's a lot of different pieces on it. On our side, we've got this thing called the Macro Grid Initiative, or MGI. And what MGI does is we weigh in on issues like interconnection with regulatory filings at the RTO level, at FERC, and then sometimes at the state level on it. And the whole idea is to help get regulations structured in a way that enables the build out of the grid of the future, which ultimately will help with interconnection.
Oh, yeah, that's really helpful. I appreciate you explaining. And then obviously, it seems like a reoccurring theme is 2030. Obviously, a lot of gigawatts we're going to need of electricity at that time. What's ACORE sort of like policy initiatives or lobbying basically for renewables on the federal level to help expedite, or obviously the energy demand is going to happen in the future?
That's a great question. We are almost 100% focused now on 2 issues federally. One is the bill that we talk about for the second one.
Sure.
That's the permitting.
Oh, permitting reform. Yeah.
When we talk about renewables, we talk about the all of the above approach to meeting the energy demand opportunity. So I openly talk about the role of natural gas and coal and nuclear, as well as wind, solar storage, and then hydro is geothermal and several other technologies, including SMRs. And then we come in and where we fit into the mix is we talk specifically about how renewables fits into that all of the approach. And as we talked about it a little while ago, the real kicker here is wind, solar, and natural gas are the three lowest forms of energy generation in the United States, number one. Number two, wind, solar, and storage, highly renewable across the board. I want to just flag here 2 dot curves because you've got a sophisticated
yeah, for sure.
that listens to this, right? So I love the fact that we've got 2 of the biggest states in the country, and both of them have almost the exact same curve, what it looks like, right, over the course of a day.
Yes.
And if you haven't seen that, it's worth looking at because a picture like that, in this case, at least 1,000 words,
Sure.
where it shows over the course of a day how each technology at scale is fitting in both Texas and California. So a really red state and a really blue state,
Yeah.
you've got massive amounts of conventional generation. You got the nuclears, you've got the coal, you've got the, except for California, you've got natural gas, and then you've got the renewables piece. And then you can look at those 2 snapshots in the middle of the day. You've got that huge amount of solar which comes in, which is pretty damn inexpensive in the middle of the day to produce. And that's charging batteries and it's doing all stuff. I just want to wrap this up and say, when I talk about renewables and the role it has, I use both of those things to say, this is how the all of the above approach is supposed to work. And it does work. And when it's done in this way, it's diverse. It provides a hedge against the over-reliance upon any one technology and fuel. And then at the same time, it's very reliable. And it's reliable because we know what the entire day is going to look like from a generation standpoint and how that's going to play out. And there's all sorts of permutations that we can get into. You can talk about what happens when there's a storm, what happens if there's a cloudy day, what happens if the wind's not blowing, and what happens if coal piles freeze and natural gas lines go down, right? Because we've seen evidence of all that happening and we're perfecting those systems for those things. So
Yeah, that's amazing. That I really appreciate you providing such great perspective, and the future obviously is bright. This has been an amazing podcast interview, Ray. I appreciate you making the time. If our audience wanted to learn more about ACORE and you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Oh, we got a great website, www.acore.org, acore.org. Go to that. All of our materials are on the site. There's a contact link in there, how you can get in touch with the team, and we'd be happy to get back to you.
Yeah, I appreciate, Ray, you being on the interview. This has been really helpful to our audience, We Call Mavericks. Thank you for making the time, and I'm excited for the rest of this conference. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Solar Maverick Podcast. The Solar Maverick Podcast is brought to you by Renew Energy. We're a solar development and consulting firm. If you believe that this podcast is adding value to you, please give us a 5-star review and share with those that you think could benefit from this information. Please email all questions, suggestions, and feedback to info@renewenergy.com. That's info@reneuenergy.com. The Solar Maverick Podcast is produced by Podcast Laundry and executive produced by Benoy Thanjan and Kevin Y. Brown.